Are you dreading your next home repair? Don't. Crew Pros is your one-call solution for everything your home needs. Whether it's heating and air, plumbing, complete roof replacement, whole home generators, and electrical repairs. Our professionals get the job done right. Crew Pros is your single source for high-quality home services at affordable prices. For everything your home needs, Crew Pros. Remodel, repair, replace.
Memphis. Nothing but Memphis. Everywhere we go, it's Memphis. Memphis, Tennessee, the beautiful land in the world.
And I'm thankful for this guy who tweeted and said I don't have that fire in my eye no more. That game right there was for him. That's what I do. I prove people wrong each and every night, and that's for him right there.
Hi, this is Tom Izzo at Michigan State, and you're listening to Grizz 901.
What up, Grizz Nation, and welcome back to another episode of Grizz 901. We are presented by the good people over at Zach Jaworski State Farm, where they treat you like family. We have another draft episode, but we're not going to go too deep. We're going to stay on the surface, but I want to ask our guy, Chip Williams here. I want to ask him a little bit about who are the players that he likes the best. We're going to try to make him pick between a certain number of players. But you know, I am your host as always. I'm Daniel Greer, and we got to bring in our other half. Maybe some call it the best half, but he is a half. Half of a man. Half amazing. What up, man? What up?
Man, living the dream. I'm a classy broad tonight. Look at us go. Not your regular, just straight bourbon. Blanton's, even though Blanton's could be in this glass. Shout out Blanton's for Taste Meets Affordability. We got an espresso martini tonight. I'm a classy broad.
Espresso martini.
It's espresso. There's no X, but yes.
Whatever. Listen, I didn't realize that we were doing that tonight. All right. The other man, the third guy, the whole reason everybody else is actually here watching our show tonight. He is, and I'm going to have to bring in this. I had no other music for you, but that was the music I chose just for you. What's up, Chip?
What's going on, man? That's perfect music. My wife joked with me this morning and made that noise, and she's like, "You know it's draft week, right?" I'm like, "Of course I know it's draft week," and that's the one noise she can associate with the draft. So, yeah, no, I think that's actually my theme music for the day. Apparently,
I love it. I love it. So I finally found it because we're having, I guess, an announcement. We're having a draft show that will be going on with the draft. We're going to start at 8 o'clock Central Standard Time. For the reason is because if you look at the way the draft should play out, I don't expect the Grizzlies to jump into the lottery. That should get us starting probably around the end of the lottery, allow us to go. We're going to go for about 2 hours. So between 8 to 10 is kind of what we're going to go. We're hoping to kind of have you maybe jump in if something big happens or if you have something on your mind, Chip. We want to have you on. So whenever you want to come on, feel free. It'll be an open invitation for yourself. But we're going to be doing that with the No Bluffing podcast. So Chris and Luke are going to be joining us. So it should be a great time. It should be a great show. We're going to be the foursome of us are going to be going with Nate and I. And so it'll be just a kind of a crazy, crazy night. But it should be a lot of fun. We haven't actually done a show together ever. And so, Chip, we have never done a show together ever. And so thoughts just kind of immediately about this draft, just in general, off the top, just maybe surface level. What are your thoughts overall?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a really fun draft to evaluate. I think everybody for a long time has heard about Victor Wembanyama. And so, I think every class kind of has their guy. Like I remember Cade Cunningham a couple of years back. It felt like I'd heard of Cade Cunningham since he was in like 8th grade. And we kind of feel the same way about Wemby. We've known about this guy for 3 or 4 years. So draft night's finally here for him. But like kind of the same thing with Scoot, the Thompson twins. Like there's a lot of guys that we've known about for years and years and years. And here they are finally in the draft. I think it's a really good draft. I think there's a lot of quality depth. I think that the Grizzlies, if they, do it right, which they typically do, they're going to end up with a really good player from this draft, whether they trade up. And I think they could probably even sit at 25 and get a contributor. But I've had a lot of fun with this cycle. I think, the expectation is 2024 is probably not going to be quite as strong as 23. And early indications, I would agree with that. But overall, yeah, I'm a fan of this class. I think there's going to be a lot of high level NBA contributors coming out of this class.
Yeah, so that's kind of my thinking as well, because from what I'm seeing is, and tell me if you think I'm wrong as well, but the top, obviously, it's very top heavy when it comes to maybe superstar level talent, like guys that you can see being really, really good NBA All Star level. There's a few at the top, but after that, it is good. But I think that middle area, it's just all about potential, and it's just unproven talent. And then you get roughly the 20s to the 40s, 20s, 35. And it is just good basketball players that have an issue, whether it's, they're not very great at defense, but they're so good in other areas, or maybe they're injury prone or have had injuries. There's just something there that's holding them back from being a top 10, top 12, top 14 level talent. But at the end of the day, they're very good. I think that middle area is the unproven talent that you're hoping that you can just kind of knock out of the park with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's pretty clear. It's Wembanyama, and then for me personally, it's Scoot and Amen. I have Amen Thompson. I have those guys in a tier, and then you kind of get to your basic lottery tier. But you hit it honestly. So my tier 4 and 5 is my players ranked 20 through 45, and there's just not a ton of separation between those guys. Like if some of those guys went in the back half of the lottery, wouldn't shock me. If some of those guys slip all the way to the middle end of the second round, it wouldn't shock me either. I think that there's going to be value had, but you're right. You're going to get a flawed prospect if you're staying back, 20 or later, most likely. Whether you mentioned like they've got a pretty clear swing skill that if it doesn't hit, it's going to be hard for them to stick in the league. They've got some history with injuries. That's kind of the standard, I would say, in most drafts, right? But it's pretty evident right around pick 20 is where that group starts to become more evident.
Yeah. All right. So we're on the same page there. So tonight we're going to get into kind of guys that I want to ask you directly. Who are any prospects that you're saying, hey, I would move up for them if the right scenario played out? I want to know who those guys are, because I think that's very important to kind of see. Let's say a draft, or let's say during the draft, you hear that the Grizzlies are making a trade. Our thoughts are going to go right to what you're talking about, right? Who are the guys that we're going to go with directly? And then from there, kind of what you're looking at. I want to ask you to pick a few guys. I'm going to give you some names and let you pick who you would take out of that group, because I think that's important to kind of see. Because the way the draft goes, obviously there's no way we can actually break it down to ask you directly. All right, now you have it, unless it's draft night. Now you have these names. Who are you going with? And so that's what we're going to try tonight. So before we do, we're going to get our guy Nate back here. He had to take a phone call, and so we're trying to figure out, what's going on. So we both now can control the screen, but we can't figure out how to get it to go the right way with three people. Anyway, so we're trying.
My bad, fellas. My bad.
It's all right. When the boss calls, you got to answer. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about move up targets, because I think that's going to be the most important thing that I kind of want to hit on early. And the move up targets, let's say the Grizzlies make the trade and you hear the noise. What is that noise? Hold on. Let's go to, is this the draft? That's not like a trade noise, but we'll play it.
Yeah.
All right. So you hear that and they made a trade and they're about to make a pick. Who are guys, if you have, 1, 2, 3, whatever you have, guys that you would say I would move up for them?
Okay, so I think the highest one that I've kind of zeroed in on recently, if this guy was to maybe slip out of the lottery, end up 15, 16, 17, somewhere in there, Cason Wallace from Kentucky. I think he checks a lot of the defensive playmaking, offensive playmaking, and just general high basketball IQ that I think the Grizzlies look for. And plus, when you look at how their roster is constructed, adding another excellent on-ball defender at a guard/wing position is great when you have a guy like Ja who's going to have to carry so much of the load offensively and take some time off defensively, things like that. So I think he is one that's like, you're going to get up there. There's no way that guy's going to be available in the 20s, in my opinion. And he good chance he doesn't even make it out of the lottery. So that's like probably the highest end you could possibly get. After that, there's a few more names. And it gets a little murky in this area just because some guys are, one mock will have this guy as a lottery pick. The next mock will have him in the 20s. But I'll just give you a couple names that I think are going to go pretty high. One is Kobe Buffkin, that I zeroed in on pretty early, to be honest with you, that I thought would be a really good fit for this Grizzlies team. And I thought he'd be available for them at 25, but as the draft has gotten closer and closer, I mean, it looks like he could even possibly go as high as 10 or 9 to Utah.
Yeah.
And then I guess I'll give you one more guy. I've always been a huge fan of Bryce Sensabaugh. ESPN's mock, their Intel mock, shocked me today when they had him at 31. I'd be comfortable taking Bryce Sensabaugh in the top 10. I think he fits a pretty clear need for what the Grizzlies really just frankly glaringly needed in the playoffs, and that's more shooting and shot creation. And so that's kind of like the 3 guys I'm really focusing in on. If we hear them trading up, that's the 3 guys that would really excite me and make a lot of sense based on the roster context.
Yeah, so Cason Wallace is obviously going into the lottery. I would expect, just like you were talking about, I would expect him to go into the lottery. Kobe Buffkin, 2 months. Did I just pull myself out? Sorry, I don't know what just happened. I guess I just completely pulled out my my microphone. So Kobe Buffkin, 2 months ago, there's no way that he was projected to go into the lottery at all. And then now, obviously, he's the fast riser here. I could see Kobe maybe that's false intel that they're getting, and he could stay back to where they could jump up and possibly grab him. But all those guys, I would imagine, are going to go between 10 and 20. And I would say Bryce Sensabaugh has the best chance to fall down into the 20s, just from like you were talking about all the mocks that we've seen. Bryce has a good chance to go. So there's nobody else that you see that, hey, the perfect fit just isn't out there, because that's what I don't see. I don't see the perfect fit out there except for like a Brandon Miller, and you're not getting him. So is there anybody else that would be the perfect fit?
Yeah, one last guy is Leonard Miller, who I'm higher on than I think some. I think if you look at kind of the skills, so there are 2 trains of thought with Leonard Miller, right? Some view him as a big wing who's got a long way to develop. Some view him as, hey, you're going to play him at the power forward center position. He's a true big, and you're getting a very funky big who's got this kind of weird handle, creates for himself, rebounds at an elite level against grown men in the G League. I think when you look at Jaren's skill set and Leonard Miller's skill set, they're very complementary towards one another. And that would make a ton of sense to me. I actually have, of the guys we've talked about, I think only Cason Wallace is higher on my board than Leonard Miller. I have Leonard 11. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
And I think specifically from the Grizzlies, he would make a lot of sense. But he's not the wing that I think everybody would be excited about that, we've needed for a long time.
Just looking at those, just in general, having a guy like Leonard Miller, does that allow you to move on from a guy like that you just signed to a contract extension and Brandon Clark?
Probably. We'll see if we've seen the best of Brandon Clark, right? Like you talk about a guy whose like best asset is his bounce and his athleticism, how quickly he can go up. Like we'll see what he looks like post Achilles. Like it's the worst injury you could have ever imagined for a guy like him. But yeah, I think so. To probably a deeper discussion, but you could even make the case that would allow you to move on from Steven Adams if the right deal came up and you needed to use his salary to match up. You'd have to obviously play a lot differently than you have in the Steven Adams era. But yeah, I do think it would make those bigs expendable, as you look to continue to improve your roster this offseason.
Yeah, I do. Nate, do you have anything else before we move on to the next subject?
Not yet. I've got my 3 guys that I want to talk about later, but for now I'm good. That was surprising to hear about Leonard Miller, though, saying that he could allow you, I wouldn't say a replacement unless you would say a replacement for Steven Adams, but allow you to move on from that. Those are high marks, I would say. Yeah.
And one thing the caveat I would throw in there too is Steven Adams also is having some lower leg injury or, lower body injuries too. And that stuff scares me, right? And I'd rather be a little early on getting out than waiting too long.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and go to pick 25 because we're going to go ahead and go with you, Nate, on these 3. So Nate's kind of looked around Grizz, Twitter, the Grizz community, whatever, and found 3 guys that he sees that are the most often, talked about. And the guys that probably he's, I guess, understood and thought, you know what, these 3 could actually be guys that the Grizzlies go after. So go ahead and give me your 3 guys. And Chip, if you'll kind of talk through those 3, but then who would you go if all 3 were available?
Yep. And so, Chip, we haven't talked about this at all, but just to set the table, I know this much about the draft, and that's being generous. Like, I've studied once for the draft, happened to nail the pick, no big deal, but I don't usually do any kind of draft stuff. It's okay.
Which
David Roddy's just my golden boy.
There you go.
It's okay. It's the bane of Daniel's existence that I got that right on a podcast. But all that to say, these are guys that I have been convinced by different people within the Grizz community would be good picks for the Grizz if they stay at 25. And one is actually a guy that you mentioned that I saw was going in that ESPN report so low, in Bryce Sensabaugh. So I saw that and I was like, I mean, I've heard so much about this guy from so many different people. I was shocked to see him that low just from what I'd heard, right? Without any kind of studying. The other one would be G.G. Jackson, which Ryan Meadows really was the one who sold me on it. I'd seen a little bit, and then when Ryan talked about it, it sounded like the second coming of Greg Oden mixed with Kevin Durant. And I was like, okay, yeah, that guy sounds like he's probably pretty good. So Ryan had me settled on that. And then the last guy is Brandon Podziemski, which I'm not positive I'm saying his name right. But that guy is the one who probably intrigues me the most, because one of the guys I've been hoping the Grizz could target with their MLE is Dante DiVincenzo. And everything I see with him reminds me of Dante DiVincenzo, a guy who can hit an open shot, create a little bit of his own shot if need be, but really just a rebounding guard, a big rebounding guard who can knock down shots. Maybe not big, but he plays big. And so those are the 3 guys that I've been convinced and sold on by people, and would love to get your thoughts on if the Grizz stay there. What does that look like?
Yeah, so to start with Bryce, since we talked about him a little bit earlier, I truly think he's a special shooting prospect. Like, the numbers are incredible. You watch the film, like, he's so good off the catch and shoot. Like, he gets his feet set, the release is quick, he's always ready to shoot, he runs off screens. But then you put the ball in his hands, and he's got this 235-pound frame. And it's kind of like, you guys remember, like, Paul Pierce would just, like, take you down and he'd get you to like 50 basket, and then he'd just shoot right over the top. And there's not a lot you can do about it. He kind of has some of that to his game, some shot creation, and just like, he's so strong and such a big body. There's not a whole lot of defense can do to stop him from getting to his spot. So from a sheer, the defense is very concerning. Like, he's just at this point not a good defender on the wing. You're probably going to have to hide him on 4s if that's an option. Maybe some bigger, slower wings from time to time. But the defense is very bad, and that's obviously where having a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr. to clean up some of that stuff allows you to take some swings on an intriguing offensive talent like Sensabaugh. G.G. Jackson, the second guy you mentioned. So personally, I am not the biggest G.G. Jackson fan. I have him 31. I have him as in my priority second round tier. So I guess at 25, that's not crazy, right? But every draft since Kleiman's taken over, I have these group of guys, and I call them, if the Grizzlies are in on them, then I guess I'm in on. G.G. Jackson would definitely fall in that category, right? I'm not the biggest, like, oh, this guy had a really inefficient season, but the flashes, you saw it, like, if he ever puts those flashes together, and that's what GG was. Like, the numbers it's atrocious. Like, he was very, very bad. And some of that, he played on a terrible team, and South Carolina had zero game plan beyond, hey, GG, here's the ball, please help us do something, right? And so that's not his fault. But I get concerned when it's a little bit of the Amani Bates situation, right? When you've kind of grown up in that, like, you've never had to play a role. How difficult is that going to be to transition into being the focal point of everything to, like, hey, go stand in the corner and we might throw you the ball? So that scares me a lot. If it was in the second round, I have no problem with GG. And really at 25, it's hard to be that upset with it. But he's not my flavor of prospect, honestly. And then Brandon, I think is how you say it. I watched a few Santa Clara games. That seems to be how they say it. I like to just call him AirPods. That seems like the nickname floating around. I'm a fan. So one thing I've done the last few years is like we've got a pretty good sample size of guys the front office really likes to draft, and you kind of combine some of the stats, run some queries on different stats website, and then just see what college players pop up with these stats, right? The number one guy on all that stuff is Brandon Podjemski. He profiles very similarly, honestly, to John Conchar. Like you can run the right stats query, and like in the history of college basketball, it's only Brandon Podjemski and John Conchar have hit XYZ metrics, right? So he's another guy, like excellent shooter, really good defensive playmaker, can make plays with the ball in his hands. I am concerned, like he's a decent athlete, but when you watch him play defense, like guys get around him pretty easily, and like he doesn't recover very well. So like that concern, not an A+ athlete by any means, but the offensive creation, the shooting, the playmaking, the high level ball movement, like all that stuff to me just screams like this is a Memphis Grizzlies player. And when I was doing my guard write up for Bluff City Media, I just put a note on Pods and I said, hey, I'd be shocked if the Grizz aren't at least somewhat interested in this guy. And we've now learned that he's been in for a workout and all that stuff. So Pods makes a lot of sense. And then if I had to rank the three, for me personally, it would be Bryce and Podjemski kind of in a same tier, very close to one another. And then I'd have Gigi Jackson, well below those two.
Got it. And if you were, so despite, forget those three guys or don't forget those three guys, whatever it would be in your mind, if it came down to pick 25 based off who you think will be there, who would you think would both be there and the Grizz should take in that moment? Would it be one of those three guys or would it be someone else?
No, if Bryce Sensabaugh is on the board, I'm going to have a really hard time passing him up. Of the guys that realistically on the Intel-based mocks are available at 25, I only have Leonard Miller higher, and I have him 2 spots higher, so they're very close. I think, Bryce Sensabaugh checks a lot of boxes and is a profile that they have not quite had. I mean, they've had some good creators, they've had some good shooters, but like I really do believe Sensabaugh is a special shooting prospect, both off the catch and off the dribble, and that's a profile I think this team is really starving for.
Hey, real quick, I know that you talked about Pods, but one thing I watched, I went back and what I like to do is try to compare apples to apples, and it's very hard, especially with these guys that are in these small, lower-level schools like a Santa Clara, right? But when I look at Santa Clara, the first thing I found was obviously they're playing Gonzaga. So I went back and watched, a lot of the film on those two games. I looked at the box score, tried to figure out what it looks like, because at that point I'm looking at comparing two guys, Julian Strother and then AirPods. And so looking at those two, I thought Julian Strother was a much better player in those games. He's obviously playing with much better talent. But honestly, the shooting numbers were bad for Pods. Like there was nothing there that really just stuck out to me. It looked like he was just, I don't know, he wasn't the best player or one of the best players on the court during those games. And that's what I saw. And that's why I just try to go back and look at, like I said, apples to apples, just to see how it is, because obviously that's the best talent. So is there anything that you maybe have went back and watched about some of these guys that you didn't know, such as, going back and comparing? Is there any like tips and tricks that you do or anything that you've seen?
Yeah. You mean just in terms of like, if I'm going back and I want to watch some of these prospects, like what am I looking for in the different games? Right. And yeah, so a lot of it, like I tell you, what's so hard to me is like the context of everything in the team setting. I kind of mentioned it a little bit with Gigi Jackson. Like if you were just to look at Gigi's raw numbers, you'd be like, how on earth is this guy on any draft board? Right. Yeah. And then you go back and watch, and you're like, oh, well, he had no help. And there was no plan other than hand him the ball and let him go create. Right. And so like for your specific example, like Julian Strother was a lower usage role player on Gonzaga, and he thrived in that role, right? As a catch and shoot, maybe attack a closeout, get to his floater, something like that. Whereas Brandon Podjemski, like if he wasn't going that night, Santa Clara had nothing else to do, right? It was all on him. And so you have to think about that a little bit too, is like how much
Yeah.
attention are they getting versus the rest of their teammates? Like if they're a team that has far superior talent, it's going to look a little bit easier for them just based upon that team context, right? And so I think team context is one thing that is sometimes lost in the evaluation process and something that I struggle with too. Because when I'm watching these games, I'm watching Santa Clara, I'm watching pods, right? And I'm watching him on offense, I'm watching him on defense. Like, how's he helping off the man? How quick is he in defensive rotations? Like, did he miss an open pass? And that's just something like, as a guy who does this as a very amateur basis, right? I don't have that information. I don't get to talk to college coaches. I don't get to say, hey, I saw he missed this cutter here. Well, the college coach said, well, yeah, we told him not to do that because we wanted him to, look for something else, right? And so those kind of things, like the IQ, I find that very hard to parse through. Sometimes it's pretty evident, right? Like, holy cow, that guy sees everything. But sometimes it's like, well, the coaches have handcuffs on him and stuff like that. So I don't know. That was probably a little bit of a long-winded answer there. But I mean, I think the team context is hard. Yeah.
I think that's very important because you're talking about looking at a guy, and because they're going to be in a completely different role once they enter the NBA, right? And so going back to that on Julian Strawther, he was more into a role that he would probably find himself on an NBA team, right? So is it easier for a guy like that to transition into the NBA because he's already at that type of role that he's doing? And does that make him maybe a more lucrative talent because he can play that actual role?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And let me actually give you a very perfect example, frankly, from this exact class. So Brandon Miller is a guy that has been in conversation for the number 2 pick, right? It's pretty back and forth depending on who you listen to. Is it going to be Scoot? Is it going to be Brandon Miller? Brandon Miller played in basically the perfect system for him to thrive at Alabama. Nate Oates put shooting all around him. It's a 5-out system. The spacing is as close to the NBA game as you're going to find.
Yeah.
So the context that Brandon Miller allowed him to be the best possible version of himself. And so that's not necessarily a knock on Brandon Miller, right? But that is important context, just like, oh, he's not quite head and shoulders above everybody. He's just playing in the perfect situation to showcase what he's good at, right? And so I honestly had someone point that out to me a few years back and just say, hey, you really have to watch and try to pay attention and see why is something not working. There's a point guard, is he having to deal with 2 6'10" lumbering guys in the paint, and that's why his rim percentage looks super low one year or something. So there you have to go beyond the numbers, right? Like, those are great and those kind of help set the table, but understanding the different situations these guys are in, I think, is very important. And really, I think that's why the Grizzlies ended up with Zaire Williams and really liked him the year they did, because it was really easy to write off the weird Stanford season that he had, right? The COVID year, and they weren't even playing in Stanford, and tried to dig a little bit deeper. And, jury's out on whether that one will work. But, I think that, those contexts, and like you were mentioning, is a guy playing in a role that he's going to play in the NBA, or do we have to project how is he going to look in the role we expect him to play?
Right. Yeah, it's tough. It's very tough. All right, we got a few more minutes, and then we'll get you out of here. I know your time is important, but I want to ask you just to kind of going down and ask to kind of choose between a couple guys, but mainly the reason that you would do that and why you would maybe stay away from another guy. And so I know you talked about pods, and so I was going to bring him up. So I'll go ahead and try to throw in somebody else. Let's say Jordan Hawkins does fall here. So Jordan Hawkins falls, who's been projected to go more into the lottery, maybe, the 19, 20 area. But then you have also Bryce Sensabaugh and Dariq Whitehead. So you have those 3 guys, all very good offensively. Who are you choosing if those 3 are on the board, and why?
Sure. So there's 2 things. One is, on my board, I have Bryce the highest, so I would probably say him. However, if I'm not a doctor, I don't have access to medicals. If Dariq Whitehead's foot, ankle, whatever, gets the okay from all team doctors, not something that's going to hamper him throughout his career, I do think he has the highest ceiling of that group. Had he not dealt with that at Duke and then subsequently had a follow-up surgery, this past, I think, May, it was just maybe a month ago, he had a follow-up surgery. I think we're talking about Dariq Whitehead as a top 10 pick. But it's on the table. I don't have access to medicals. I can't tell you what that looks like. Hawkins, I'm a little bit lower on. I think he's a really fine shooter. And he's got a pretty clear role at the next level. Don't think he's going to be much of a defender, but like a guy you can run off any action and he's going to be able to get his shot off. That's fun. I just think he's a little more limited as a player, doesn't bring much else to the table. Whereas Sensabaugh and Dariq, I think you get a little bit more actual on-ball creation. Plus, you also get the standstill jump shooting, running off actions, things like that.
Yeah. All right. I like that. So my I guess a little tease. My pick that I think the Grizzlies are going to go after is a guy like Dariq Whitehead. I think that they see him, if he's available, he's a guy that they would like. For one, the defensive upside is much greater than the other guys, that especially we just talked about, because he is decent to possibly good at defense compared to the other ones. They're just not good at all. But he does have the offensive upside as well, to where he could be a top level, top 10 talent. And we've seen them in the past, and it might be maybe not in the Zach Kleiman era, when they would actually go take those guys who should be ranked in that top level, but for whatever reason they weren't, and they had a bad year, such as Zaire Williams. They did the same thing with him. So I'm curious, and I think that they'll go after him. The only thing that I'll give, just as you did, is the caveat: his medicals just could not come back clean. And at that point, I think they would move on. But if he's there, and I think the medicals check out, I think they would go after him. A couple more guys. I'm going to ask about Ben Shepherd out of Belmont. We'll go Marcus Sasser out of Houston. And who's one more? Is there anybody else that you might see there? Jalen Slauson there in the second round. All of them are available with pick 45 for the Grizzlies. Who would you go after?
Wow. That's a great one. That's a really good group. 3 guys I like a lot. I think just specifically for the Memphis Grizzlies, I would take Ben Shepherd. I would take the wing. I actually think he can put the ball on the floor a little bit. He's kind of combo guard-ish, but really at a wing size. Very comfortable off the ball. I'm a massive Marcus Sasser fan. I think that dude gets after it defensively. He is an excellent jump shooter. My concern is that maybe 6'3" when he puts his shoes on, and he's not a point guard. He's more of an off-ball guard. That's what he's most comfortable at, and that gets really hairy defensively when you start talking about how's he going to guard up. He does have a solid wingspan, but Sasser, if he was 6'5", 6'6", I think he's a lock to go in the first round, but the height's a little concerning. Jalen Slauson is another one where you start running a lot of the stats-based queries, and his name pops up a lot versus what the Grizzlies typically look for. The best way I could say is he's like a less bouncy kind of Brandon Clark type player, like an undersized center, but can play make a little bit. Really finishes violently at the rim. Excellent defender. That's 3 really good ones, by the way, Dan. That's not an easy pick. I guess gun to my head, I'd take Shepherd, but I like all 3 of those guys a lot.
So I was watching, I think it was roughly midnight last night. I was watching video on Ben Shepherd, and I saw the same thing that you just talked about. He can put the ball on the floor. And I'm thinking to myself, and I've said this on this show many times, I'm looking at upgrading the top 8 players on this Grizzlies team. I could care less who's 9. I could care less who's 10. We know that Jitty and we know that X is 11 and 12 on this roster. If you want to be a really good team and win a championship, you have to have guys that can be your backups, your guys you can go to, break glass in case of emergency kind of guys. I don't care about 9 and 10. Give me the best ones. And I think that you could go and get a guy like Ben Shepherd, and he could be a backup point guard type role player for you. Fill that role, but also play alongside Ja if you need him to, just because, what is he, 6'6"? 6'6".
Mm-hmm.
He's not 200 pounds yet. We need to get him some PB&J, eat a lot of them. But eventually he will kind of grow into his man body, as I say. And I think that he will be a guy that really could be a steal at pick 45. But some mocks that I've seen is I don't believe he'll be there at 45, but you never know how this thing's going to shake out. So who knows? Nate, do you have anything else?
No, thankfully for everyone involved. No, that's the only draft input I have. So, no, Chip, it's been awesome, man. Thank you for coming on. It's been great to meet you for the first time. It's been fun.
No, man, pleasure's all mine. You guys have like real guests on here that do like paid full time to do draft work. So I'm humbled to be a guy with a regular 9 to 5 and watch some basketball games on the side. So no, this pleasure's all mine, man. I appreciate it.
Man, you gave us so much info. Obviously, we had a chance to kind of meet at the whatever. I don't even know what that shindig was. It was a playoff
party.
Game. Yeah, it was a
there you go.
Game. And so it was cool to meet you. You remind me so much of Ryan Meadows. I know y'all have done a podcast in the past. That you did an episode. But one last thing before we get you out of here, I want to know one guy, your diamond in the rough that nobody else is big on. Because I know you're probably like Ryan, and you want to talk about your diamond in the rough. So give me one guy before you get out of here.
Oh, that's tough. A lot of pressure. I'm going Demoy Hodge from Missouri. Yeah, Demoy Hodge from Missouri. He is super old. Like, I think he turns 25 in December, maybe. I mean, he is old, right? Like, he'd be like the third oldest starter on the Grizzlies if he was on their team right now. But talk about another guy who just like you start running the searches and stuff. Like Demoy Hodge is up there with every Grizzly-based search you can find. So that's the guy. I lock it in. Demoy Hodge. He's going to go 56, 2-way contract for the Grizzlies, and we're all going to have a lot of fun watching a 25-year-old dominate a bunch of 18 and 19-year-olds at the summer league. So that's what I'm most excited about.
That's what I'm talking about, Chip. That's it. That is the diamond in the rough. I knew you would have somebody because, all you draft nerds, as I call you, all you draft nerds have that guy. I have that guy, and I'm not even a draft nerd, but I try to watch some basketball. But Chip, can't thank you enough, man. You're the best. Join us, but also everybody else. Join us the draft night. We're going to start here at 8:00. We're going to go all night. Chip will be in and out of here potentially. Especially if it's a boring draft, he's probably not showing up. So Kleiman, get it together, buddy. We need Chip on the show. All right, Chip, that's all we got, buddy. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
I don't know if he's gonna. Am I working this right? Yes, I worked it right. All right, I got us to a two split. All right. Before we go ahead and get into the other things we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about Ja because I think that's very important to kind of hit on that. Maybe we transition straight over to Ja, and then we'll end the show with some guys in my predictions, just in general, of who I think the Grizz is going to go after and get. So we'll end it some draft talk, but we probably have had enough draft talk. Let's go ahead and get to some Ja news. But before we get there, let's go ahead and give our presenting sponsor. It is Zach Jaworski State Farm. If you need any kind of insurance, whether it is your home, auto, if you're looking for life insurance as well, you can give them a call at 901-794-3691. Zach and his team does a good job. They will treat you like family as their motto says. But go ahead and give them a call. They're out in East Memphis as well as Collierville. And you can go into the office directly and meet with Zach and his team. But give them a call at 901-794-3691. And I promise you they will save you some money. All right, let's go ahead and get to the Ja stuff. I'm going to let you lead off. You haven't had a chance to talk a lot, so I'm going to let you go ahead and go about it. What are your thoughts on this whole Ja news, the 25 games? We've talked about that directly, but what's up now?
So, I mean, we've all been paying attention to the news that's been coming out, and the most recent stuff is, one, the gun that is not a gun. And there's a lot that goes into that. And two is the Ja's camp feeling like the NBA and the media are out to get them. Those are the two major pieces of news I would say have come out since we last talked. And I think there's a lot to talk about with that. But my first thing I would want to ask you is, when it comes to the gun being not a gun, do you think that should impact the number of games Ja was suspended? Do you think that warrants a lesser suspension or an equal suspension if the gun he had in the video was in fact not a gun?
So I got a question. All right. And I'll kind of break this down on a relationship level, because I think this is the easiest thing to relate to everybody. So let's say you were just caught, and you're in a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, significant other relationship. You were just caught by your significant other, maybe kissing somebody else. Okay.
Cheating
In a sense. Yeah. So you're kissing them, you're cheating. Right. And so you went through it, you've apologized, and you're going to work through it, right? You've talked about it. You want to be with each other, but then you're out. You're supposed to be somewhere else. You're just having a good time, but you're with a bunch of other girls, and maybe it looks like you're doing something, but we don't know. But at that point, just like anything else, you're a little too close to the sun. And I think no matter what he had, whether that is a lighter or not a lighter, buddy, you got to read the room. And I know it sucks. And I know that now has come out and said it's a lighter. We don't actually know. Unless they pulled him over, the NBA pulled him over right then and said, hey, what is that?
Yep.
You actually don't know. Because I can always go buy a lighter and I can then light it. One thing I will say, a little behind the scenes, I don't know this, so don't come at me. I believe his camp knowingly put that out there thinking it would spin it in the positive direction for Ja.
Yep. And just straight up what I asked you, I'm 100% on board with you. One, there's no way to prove that he didn't finagle that to say, oh, it wasn't an actual gun, whatever. And no matter what, this whole thing is about league optics. It just is. Like, you want people to be safe. You want Ja to be safe. You want him to be a good influence on the kids that are following him, the people that are following him. But at the end of the day, it is conduct detrimental to the league. And the league doesn't want to be associated with firearms. Whether they're consistent on that or not, that is what this is about. And at the end of the day, the fact that it's not clear whether or not the gun was real or not is a real problem. And it's the principle rather than what actually happened. And so I don't think that should impact the suspension all that much personally. I think that 25 games was hefty no matter what, in my opinion. I think the suspension was hefty no matter what. I still don't think real gun versus not real gun, it matters. Yeah. I think it's the same thing in general. On a personal level, as a fan, does that make you feel any better or worse if it wasn't a real gun?
No, because what it shows me is the fact that his camp, and I believe that he knowingly knows that video came out after the fact about him lighting it, for the simple fact that it was him lighting it, right? So he was doing that. He was sending a video for a reason. I think that shows me that I don't know if there is an adult in the room. I'm just being honest. And that sucks. Like, I just think there's been a lot of bad decisions all the way around. And I still think that there isn't a step in the right direction that we have seen. And that's what scares me the most, is that I don't believe that that's happening. I hope that there is a PR team that they're trying to figure out, like, hey, can we figure out what direction we need to get Ja going? And my opinion, if it was me, I would go straight to Nike and say, hey, I need to make sure that I don't do something stupid. And honestly, it could be an honest mistake. Thinking, listen, I've been 23 before. I made probably dumber decisions. I can't imagine being on camera 24/7 and always being whatever. And he's probably just being a young kid. And honestly, he's probably just being stupid. So yeah, I think there needs to be an adult in the room. And I think there needs to be a PR team. If it was me, I'd go to Nike and say, hey, can you hook me up? Because I need help.
I think you're right. They need an adult in the room. I also will admit, if it was a lighter, that does make me feel better. Because that just tells me it's a goofy kid saying, like, oh, look, I'm doing what I wasn't supposed to do. And like, when you're 23, it's like, come on.
I agree.
Like you said, we've all done much dumber. And if it's just him being a goofy kid as opposed to literally doing the same exact thing, that makes me feel a little bit better. It doesn't make me feel a lot better. You still got to be smarter.
Right.
You still got to have an adult in the room. You still got to improve, just like you were saying. At the same time, I had that FU authority stuff in me when I was super young. And so it's like me being like, oh, it's a pencil, not a pen. Like that's something I would have done too. And I think as a 23-year-old kid, 23-year-old me could relate to that.
Yeah.
In every way possible.
Yeah.
Now moving on to the second part, we got our guy Grizz Company man in here. Indirect report that is saying he thinks the NBA and the media are out to get him. I'm not even going to ask you first. I got like zero stock in that report. I will say I think he probably does feel that way. And to an extent, I wouldn't blame him.
What's the difference then?
I mean, I don't think that there's something like, oh, Jaws people are putting it out there, whatever. I mean, you know how I feel about this. I think there's a snake in the grass that all of a sudden is on the outside looking in and is trying to feed stuff to people. Personally. Possibly. When Tim McMahon goes on and says people close to Ja, or maybe I should say people formerly close to Ja, that's all I really needed to hear.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's the indication I got from that. Because while the video coming out could be Ja's camp trying to finagle that saucy bagel, there's nothing good that comes out of Ja having a report that says he feels like people are coming after him. Nothing good for him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's where I draw the line in between those two. So I put no stock in it, even though I feel like he probably does feel that way a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised. To be honest, the media has been on him since the end of the 2022 playoffs. They've been on him, and they've been on this team a little bit more. That being said, he did this to himself. And the number one thing that we talked about on Friday, I believe is when we recorded, when the suspension came out, got to have accountability. You cannot feel like you've got to just own it. Yeah. Even if it feels heavy, even if it feels like you're being slighted, you just got to own it and say, I've got to be better. That's got to be the attitude going forward. So, one, I don't think Ja did it. I think it's somebody outside of his current circle feeding that kind of information to people. Two, I hope it's people outside of his current circle feeding that information to people, because you don't want to hear that from Ja at this point.
Yeah. All right. So can both be true? Can that be the actual truth? Like, can that be the truth that they feel that way, but also this report could not be actually like a direct report from Ja? Like,
yes,
bad reporting, but it's still true.
I wouldn't call it bad reporting. To be clear, I don't think it's bad reporting. I think it's the information you have to deal with. I think McMahon trusts that information. At the same time, I can think that Ja feels that, but at the same time, him and his people aren't the ones that are putting it out there. It's somebody who knows that, but is now trying to kind of get theirs, put it out there.
Well, I don't know where the report stems from. Okay. I cannot give any insight to that. What I can give insight to is that from a source that I have in particular, I know 100% that his camp feels that to be true. Like, to a T, that report was 100% how they feel. Now, that's why I say, I know from what I hear, and if I'm hearing that and they're saying, hey, that's probably pretty spot on, then I'm assuming that it's not hard to talk with people and hear and play the telephone game and eventually just say, you know what, I'm going to run with that, because if that's what they're saying, I'm going to go ahead and report that. They might not have come out and said it directly to somebody, and somebody might not have leaked it, but it could be a known understanding thing of, hey, they just feel this way just from conversations that we're having. I think that is how it kind of came to pass. And so, yes, it's not a bad reporting, but it is a sense of you're not getting the actual statements. You're just assuming, and you're just putting all the puzzle pieces together and saying, hey, I'm going to go with this because it actually is. If this is how they feel, I'm going to go ahead and make it a story.
Right. And that's why I want to say it's not bad reporting. And I think you and I are both like, yeah, we think it is the truth. Like, and I think you can even add a third layer to it. I think it can be true that the media has been on that dude and has been after him, right? at the end of the day, the response still has to be the same exact thing. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
It does not matter that the media is coming after you. The media goes after every superstar, goes after everyone not named LeBron James has had the media absolutely coming after him. And even LeBron has certain people in the media coming after him, right? And so you just got to be like, it doesn't matter. I'm going to get myself straight and I'm going to do what I need to do. And if they want to go try and spin stuff, let them go try and spin stuff. Get your KD burners going or something, man. Actually, don't. Stay off of social media. But do what KD does now if you're going to be on social, right? Like, make fun of the people trying to make fun of you. Like, just go ahead, move forward.
Yeah, this is a transition for him. I like I said, I think he needs to have some type of PR team and just kind of, you know what, just as we just did with Bluff City Media, just kind of get a organization, like break it all down and say, all right, we're kind of growing at a bigger level and we're growing at a faster pace than we expected. Let's go ahead and break some stuff down. Let's make sure we're putting the pieces in the right direction and make sure that we have everybody set up for success. Because as you grow, as you become a superstar in this league, you obviously have more on your head, right? You have to do these appearances and these endorsements. And you have, obviously, you need to have better trainers and better dietitians. You need all of this to happen. And because of that, the fame is coming and he's just blowing up, especially over the past 5 years. It's an absolute skyrocket. And so, listen, I think that what he did is stupid, but I also can see that a 23-year-old can make a stupid decision. And I'm not saying he's a bad kid. I just think he's made bad decisions. It's up to him at this point moving forward. There's no more like, hey, get back in the good graces. Like, hey, if you screw up again, whatever. At this point, it's S or get off the pot. We've said that, and I think this is time for him. He's going to grow up. He's going to be fine. It is 25 games. I just think it's in a bad predicament at this point because now if he is the one who has to say, I'm going to appeal this, it's going to make him look bad. He's in a no-win situation because he wants to get it back on the court. He wants to get less than 25 games. But if you can call it a business too and just say, hey, this is part of business. I want to get back on the court.
That's where I'm at, man. I get it. Like, we're on here saying I'm number one. Ja has to hold himself accountable. He's got to own his mistake and he's got to own the punishment that comes with it. I don't see how appealing the suspension is counterproductive to that.
Okay.
Because it's strictly business.
Right.
That's money out of your pocket, man. Like, I mean, yeah, you got Grizz Company Maine, and that's, I think, the concern about everybody. The appeal, if he appeals, the media will crush him for
100%. That's the issue.
Who cares? That's the number one thing. Who cares? You already got Ja Wick memes all over the place. You've already got, like, I remember I saw another thing today where some guy robbing some guitar store that happened to look a little like Ja. And it's like, wait a minute. And I'm like, they're already doing that. They're going to do that. It's not going to stop anytime soon. I don't see how you make anything worse by appealing the suspension. Like, I understand in concept and principle why that would be the case. But I'm like, bro, this is money in his pocket or out of his pocket right now. Like, it is your livelihood. It is your job. Why would you not appeal it? Why not?
Yeah.
And it can't be a PR thing. You're getting destroyed by PR. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Like,
it is going to change nothing in the scheme of things. If you get it together, then you're going to get together and this will all be in the past. If you don't get it together, then a PR from appealing a suspension is the least of your worries. You could use the extra cash you'd get by winning the appeal. And he will win the appeal, right? I mean, I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah, potentially. It could, listen, if it gets cut in half of, they say 15 is fair, and in silver and the NBA saying 25 is fair, then they're going to meet in the middle, obviously around 20, whatever. I don't care if it does lessen it, just as Grizz Company Maine said, just, screw it. We need him on the floor. Like, if he has to appeal to do that, so be it. At this point, from this moment all the way until the end of the 20 games, you're talking about, yes, he can whitewash his relationship and his image a little bit easier and get past it. It might screw him over right now, but you can also say, listen, I need to do this because I don't want a precedent set on my head going forward. And that's can be the conversation from the NBPA.
NBAPA.
Yeah, whatever. So they can go ahead and say that's the reason. You've seen that in baseball and other sports. Whenever something comes down like, hey, that's not fair. These are the rules. We want to make sure that we get on the right page. And so we'll see. But I think that's enough about Ja. We want to go ahead and, move forward with all of this. I'm hoping this is the last time we're hearing about it. Or if it is an appeal, maybe that'll be the last time then.
Get that man off socials. There is no reason he should be on social media as much. That's why I'm like the PR stuff. I'm like, who cares? Put your phone away. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I haven't been on Twitter hardly the past few days. I keep getting on and seeing people doing these mock trades and then crucifying each other over trades that will not happen. None of them will happen. I'm like, there's just nothing on there that matters.
Get angry for no reason.
Yeah, so he just shouldn't care. That should be another step in him not caring. Appeal. So what if the media screws you?
Yep.
What do you care Shannon Sharp has to say?
I like it. All right, let me go to my my predictions. And Nate, you don't have predictions, right? You're not going to go with a prediction?
Is this draft predictions?
Yeah, draft predictions.
David Roddy.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and throw out mine. My official predictions is that the Grizzlies can figure out a way to move up into either the I guess the 20s area, somewhere around there, or if they don't do that, I believe they will figure out a way to move up early in the second round. I think they're going to move up in either spot. And at that point, because I think there's a guy that they want, and if he's starting to fall down into an area they feel comfortable at the 25, I don't see them maybe moving, but I think it might be easier for them to move up into the second round because they do have those 2 second-round picks. I think there's possibly an opportunity there because there is a bunch of guys, as Chip was saying, that fit the mold of the Grizzlies. And so at that point, they might consolidate and get 2 picks that way and then get an undrafted guy to put on the third person of the G League team. I don't know. But if the Grizzlies stay as put, I'm going to give you 6 names. The first name I give you is the guy who I would choose if you're I guess looking at home and hearing at home. But I'm going to go ahead at pick 25. I'm going to go with Derek Whitehead over Bryce Sensabaugh for the simple fact, as I talked about earlier, I think Derek is a much better overall player, both on the offensive end and defensive end, even though Bryce is incredible offensively. That's not a knock if for some reason we land on Bryce over Derek. I'm guessing that the medicals did not come out to be perfect, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and say Derek over Bryce Sensabaugh. At pick 45, if these 2 guys are there, I am shocked, and I'm figuring out a way to go and pick at 45 and 46. But if both guys are there, I'm going to get either Julian Strother, who I think is one of the sleepers in this draft. I think he's going to be very good. And then Ben Shepherd, as he was talking about earlier, is a perfect mold for the Grizzlies. But Julian Strother over Ben Shepherd, in my opinion. But I'm good with either Julian Strother or Ben Shepherd at 45. 56, Jalen Slauson, as I asked him earlier. And then somebody who has been falling down the draft board, and I know we talked about him. We talked about him with Ryan, Terquavion Smith. I fell in love with Terquavion. Or no, he said, I've fallen out of love with Terquavion. Terquavion Smith out of NC State. He's just a smaller guy, but he is an absolute bucket. He reminds me of Crawford so much back in the day. So that's my guys, Derek Whitehead, Julian Strother, Jalen Slauson. Those are my predictions. I think they'll draft at least one of the 6 people that I mentioned. And at that point, I'm going to feel good about myself.
Yep. And then the Summer League undrafted free agent signing of Kedrian Johnson. And I'll feel pretty good. If that happens, then, I mean, I might have to start getting into this draft mumbo jumbo. That might have to happen. Hey, I will say, I think you're right. The Grizzlies I think they'll be drafting come Thursday night. I think they will move up or move down. I would lean towards moving up because that's what they do. But I doubt they keep it at 25. I will say, when can you start doing free agent signings?
I haven't looked at the date. It's a little bit afterwards.
Okay.
It's like July 7th or something. I don't know.
Okay. So if the Grizzlies don't draft, I think we will all be very, very, very happy campers if come Thursday night they don't have that first round pick anymore. I don't anticipate that happening. I am saying I'm leaning towards Dorian Finney-Smith being a Grizzly at this point. I know that was a trade that got me absolutely shat on the most when we did our Bleacher Report show. But I thought it was the good, not big splash trade the Grizzlies could make. And especially after Wendy came out and started saying that was something to keep an eye on, that made me feel good about it. The last thing I did want to ask you about, we haven't spent a lot of time on it. What do you think about Draymond to the Grizzlies? Because you are not a Draymond guy.
Yeah, so I think his time is done. I don't think he is the player that he ever was. Now, if he's leaving $27 million on the table, he's not going to look to take less, in my opinion,
bro.
Unless you're going to take a 4 years, $20 million, and you're looking to get $80 million, right? For 4 years, 80, maybe. I don't know. I don't even know if he has 4 years left in the league. I'm just
here's
curious.
My thing. I don't think he's a $30 million a year player. Do you?
No.
I don't think Draymond Green is a dumb guy. And
no.
and shout out to Anthony saying, because I put this out there earlier, but he said this and I think it too. Draymond is 100% the type of dude to say, you guys are going to pay him, but you're not going to pay me. F you. I'm not going to play. Even if I have to go take a pay cut. Even if I have to go take a pay cut, I'm going to go somewhere else to prove you wrong and to basically give you the middle finger. I always thought Kyrie was the kind of guy to go do that, but that was less him being FU, more just being a weirdo. I think Draymond is the kind of guy that will give you the double bird and go take less money somewhere to then be like, look how good I am, and now I'm beating you. And where better to go than Memphis?
Yeah.
I mean, and listen, it's a long shot. This is not a prediction. This is another uninformed take, just like I said on Friday. It's another uninformed rant, but it is far from out of the realm of possibilities of what I could see Draymond doing. And I think if someone says they don't want him on the team, I think you're crazy. I think if you can get him at a price that you can pull off, you do it.
That's the issue.
12 times out of 10.
And that's always been my issue personally. I'm not saying he's a bad player. I'm not paying him $27 million. That's just me. I'm not.
Nobody is. That's my thing. I don't see anybody is. And I think he knows that opting out of that contract.
If he's making less money, which is obviously fine, he is a really good fit for this team. The issue, in general, is what are you going to have to give up, in general, because I'm not saying you're having to make a trade, but you can't. I guess you move Steve-O, because at that point you have to move Jaren to the 5, and you're still in the same spot, because you can't have Draymond, Jaren, and then and Steve-O all in the same starting lineup. That's not going to work, right? So at that point, and it is the Michigan State ties with Jaren and X. So I don't know, but as Ryan said, is Draymond playing a game of chicken with the new GM? Possibly. But the problem is with the new CBA, they are screwed, because
that's
they
what
can't
I
pay.
was gonna say.
So
maybe, but they already are out of money, man. Like, it's the same thing that we were talking about with the Suns on Friday. It's like, yo, what kind of money are they going to come up with at this point? Like the Suns can at least trade Ayton. Who are the Warriors going to trade? You can't trade Jordan Poole. Like, who's going to take on that contract?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, normally I would say, yeah, he's definitely just playing chicken. But I'm like, yo, he ain't worth the money he was going to get paid in the first place, if we're being honest. And you don't have the kind of money to just do that if you're the Warriors. So,
yeah. And the thing is, he probably has enough money where he can say, you know what?
I think he's just being petty.
I can take less money and be okay. I don't know. I'm curious. This isn't a Golden State Warriors podcast, but man, their money is getting tight, and this is usually how it is with championship teams. Is it all comes to a head at some point, and that's why you have to break them up. So we'll see. All right, so make sure you join us. I know that Grind City Media is doing a draft show. Their starts at 7 and it ends at 8. And so we're going to pick up pretty much right when they end. And so, hey, look, Grizz Company Maine. Draymond gets 4 years, $80 million from the Grizzlies, and we move. Steve-O's knees ain't acting right. All right. No knock to Steve-O and his knees, but I don't understand what you do with Steve-O if you do bring in Draymond, but that's another issue you ain't gonna worry about. You could put Tyus and Steve-O together, and you have a really good player you can bring back with money. So, but yeah, so we do have our draft show. We're gonna invite some different people to come on and be with us. But it will be a draft show with Nate and I here at Grizz 901, but also the No Bluffing podcast. And then we'll make sure that we have other people that we bring on throughout the show. And so we'll figure out, but we're going to be here for about 2 hours. Hopefully get, especially through 45. And then if we're creeping up on 56, we might hang around until that pick is there, unless, stuff's going on. But we'll be here 8:00 on Thursday. Make sure you tune in. But that's all we have. Everybody, let's have a great week. We'll see y'all in 2 days. Be nice and tell your friends.